those three things that you see on the screen, and we call it the ACE. Accelerate and increase revenue and ROI, collapse deployment cycles, eliminate barriers and complexity. The ACE is the program that we're coming out with, and we've done this already with a number of customers and partners. The solutions I'm going to show you are vendor and device agnostic. They'll work with any vendor, any IP application. It is a Ethernet like you would normally know, except it does some different features that no other Ethernet product can. We've been doing this for over 10 years now. You can see right from the beginning we started winning awards. That one right in the middle of 2008, TMC Labs Innovation Award. That's around the time that I used the product in 2009, early 2009, and we've been doing it ever since. Proud to have many, many customers, millions as a matter of fact, of endpoints enabled all over the world. Our company has reach globally. We've got people in South America, North America, Europe, Asia, and all the way over into Australia as well. So we do have global reach. We have the global customers as well. Some local ones. We've got a lot of county, cities, and school districts. We've got a lot of different brands that you may recognize here on that screen, and even some more recognizable brands here. As you can see, there's some very, very large customers using this, and the big common thing for them is they were able to save themselves a substantial amount of money, time, and eliminate disruption and risk. In fact, we're proud to say that we've helped customers save over $100 million in infrastructure costs over the last 10 years that we've been doing this, and all the while allocating more of their savings to the applications and better endpoints that we talked about earlier on. That's important when you're doing a modernization. Eliminating any risk, so we do provide a proof of concept, working with your Forerunner. If you're a Forerunner employee and you've got a customer that you'd like to go and introduce this to, and you think there may be an opportunity to do a proof of concept, that'd be great. If you're a customer and you'd like to arrange a proof of concept, please get in touch with your Forerunner representative, and they can arrange to do a proof of concept. We'll provide the product, we'll provide training, and you can use it in your own environment to IP-enable endpoints for 30 or 60 days. We've got lots and lots of customers. In fact, most of the customers you saw on the previous slide started their journey with a proof of concept. And then we'll talk about how you can really accelerate the migration and collapse the deployment cycles. No longer will you have to wait for months or even years in some instances. Some of those customers were facing multi-year deployments where we were able to slash that down to days. Gone from a year to a day. Believe it or not, there's 2 or 3 that I'm going to show you that did exactly that. And it all starts with this. We call it the blue line. You know, you see this in a lot of diagrams. You got a blue line, and that's basically the IP backbone, and then you can just plug all these things into it, and everything works honky-dory, and everything's good. But the reality is that's not the case. When you look at a customer that has a legacy solution in place, meaning analog or digital phones, analog or digital cameras, and, you know, PCs, computers, laptops, or their desktops, the environment looks something like what you see on the screen. On the left-hand side, you've got your telephony network. You've got your point-to-point wiring that runs from the room, the MDF closet, the main telephony closet, all the way to the endpoint, point-to-point. Same thing on the protection network. That's the cameras. The common thing between cameras and voice is they're real-time applications. They require a dedicated path to deliver quality voice and video. If you lose packets, you're going to have a problem. You're not going to be able to understand the voice. You're not going to be able to see the video. On the data side, that network that you see in the middle was designed to deliver as much bandwidth as possible to those endpoints. And if you lose packets along the way, no problem. TCP/IP and Ethernet was designed for that. Drop packets if you can't make it in time, reassemble them, disassemble them. If that happens, your file may take a few more seconds to download, or your email may take a little bit longer to open, but it's not going to affect your ability to actually use it. Whereas if you lose packets on the voice, you can't have a conversation. And if you lose packets on the surveillance or on the cameras or on the video, you're not going to be able to view the video. So that's a big thing that you got to keep in mind, making sure that those critical solutions are up and running at all times. And normally what happens when you go to a migration or customers want to do an IP modernization, they want to move from analog or digital phones, they want to move from analog cameras or other analog devices, access controls, speakers, emergency notification, wireless access points, anything like that. They're going to take a look at what they've got, and they've got to go through typically a rip and replace, meaning pulling new cable, upgrading those data closets, those IDF closets that you see in the middle of our picture there. And what I mean by that is those closets, most of the time, a customer does not have sufficient power to run the new IP devices that are now getting power from the closets through PoE switches. They also almost never have proper backup power, if any at all. Most customers don't have any backup power in their data closets. In fact, my company, none of our buildings, we had over 5,000 locations globally, none of our buildings except for our head office data center had UPS backup. The thought was that the batteries fail at the worst possible time, so who cares? If someone's computer goes off for an hour or so, that's fine. And most people have laptops these days anyway, so they don't need backup power. But if your phones are going down and your cameras are going off because you don't have proper backup power, you got a big problem. And that could be a huge expense a lot of times, and also disruption and scheduling the time. Then you've got staff and all the rest to think about as well. So the rip and replace, as I said, what we're talking about now is the modern LAN. The modern LAN is something, a concept that Frost and Sullivan has come up with, and they're actually going to be releasing a white paper shortly about it. We were interviewed for that. And basically the concept is that you start with the endpoint in mind, meaning instead of having to be encumbered and worry about having Ethernet in a location where you want to have a device, a phone, for example, in an area that you don't have an Ethernet drop, or a camera in a parking lot, or in a stadium, or anything like that. So instead of worrying about the Ethernet part first and then the device and application, start with the end in mind. Start with the application and the device. I want to place a camera here because that's where it makes the most sense. And how do I get what it needs is where we come into play with what I'm going to show you today, and that's the modern LAN. Here's an interesting statistic. This was actually done by Numerida's research at the end of 2016, and I think it's still pretty, it holds true based on what I've seen. And what they found, they interviewed a bunch of mid and large size customers in different verticals, government, healthcare, higher education, K-12. And what they found is that 72% of companies are not fully IP when it comes to their voice. And the same holds true for video. I know that because we do a lot of work in the security and surveillance space. 72%, meaning that 72% of mid to large customers out there are still maintaining analog phones, digital PBXs, analog cameras, analog access control devices, analog speakers and pagers in the classrooms and in the university campuses, 72%. And the number one reason why is the infrastructure barriers. What they told Numerida is that they can't justify the ROI of spending $400, $500, $800, $1,000 a drop to get a port ready for IP to put an IP phone or an IP camera. So they just keep what they have and they don't do anything. Well, that doesn't work for long. Eventually those things need to be replaced, and a lot of times customers are faced with that challenge, and it ends up costing them an enormous amount of money. It gives them a ton of disruption, and it takes a long, long time. So we're going to show you something completely different. And look, think of this as your budget. You've got a customer, or you are a customer, and you've got a budget that you've allocated to do an IP modernization. And the first thing you need to do is have the infrastructure and network in place. If you look at these three bars, think of these as the budget, the total budget. And if you look, the dark blue box is the infrastructure and network. And it's 50 to 80% of customers' budgets are spent on that infrastructure. It's true. That's the numbers that we got. The next box that you see, the light blue, is the IP devices, the phones, the cameras, the endpoints, whatever those may be. And then finally, the box at the very top, the kind of orangey brown box, is the applications. And the applications and gear are what drive the ROI. When a customer is thinking about modernization and moving to an IP platform, they're thinking about the applications and the devices that they're going to be able to use to streamline business, to save time, to have better customer service, that type of thing. But most of their budget's being spent on infrastructure. That has no return at all. So we're going to turn the tables, and if you see it, the box, we flip them around. Less on the infrastructure network where there's no return, more on the applications and devices that drive more return. And we see it over and over and over again. Customers will come in, they'll have a budget. In fact, I can share with you now a story. We did a job with TransUnion in downtown Chicago about 7 years ago, and they had just gotten a quote to redo their 10-story building in downtown Chicago, do all the things I talked about, the cable, the switches, the backup power, all the rest. It was going to cost them $1.8 million, and it was going to take them about a year to complete because they had to move people around in different locations as they did this refresh, and year and a half even maybe. They weren't sure, but 1.8 million was the number. And when I met with them, I said, well, how many users are there? And they said about 1,500. I said, wow. So they asked me, well, what is this solution that you're going to show me cost? And I said, it's about $200 a user. So think about that. For $300,000, we're able to do the same thing that they were going to spend $1.8 million on. And fast forward, they did a proof of concept. They actually used the product. They loved it. And about 3 or 4 months later, they ended up doing the entire building. All 1,500 users were deployed in a single weekend. Remember what I said before, it was going to take a year? It took a weekend. They went in on Saturday morning, started doing the deployment. By Sunday, they were done, did their testing, and Monday morning, all the users came in and had a brand new IP phone on their desk. And what they ended up getting was the best color screen IP phone that they had. They were going to compromise and deploy the cheapest IP phones and just do a dial tone for dial tone replacement because of the big budget they were spending on the infrastructure. Instead, they saved all that money. They bought the better phones. They also bought the applications that were driving the return, things like call recording, mobility, collaboration tools, conferencing tools. They didn't think they'd have the money for that in the first year. They were actually going to put that off to year 2 and 3. So think of the opportunity that brings to you in your company to be able to slash those costs for infrastructure that have no return and deliver a real true ROI and great applications in your migration to IP. So the right devices for the project. Basically, a better ROI, and that's what we're all here for today. So I'm going to show you what we call the CHARIoT line of switches from NVT Phybridge, playing in on the IoT in the middle of the screen, as you can see there, because we're talking about any IP endpoint that needs to be enabled has some sort of cable running to it now, or maybe you want to run a cable to a place where you don't have a cable today, and we can overcome some distance limits that standard Ethernet has. And if you look at this, typically Ethernet switches right from the beginning always had these two things that kind of were difficult to overcome and had to be worked around. 100-meter reach, 328 feet, and needed to be Cat 5 or 6 cable with all 4 pairs required to deliver the type of bandwidth and the PoE power for these devices. Whether you've got a standard switch or a expensive enterprise-grade switch, they both share that common weakness, where our CHARIoT switches allow you to use existing single-pair, 2-pair, 4-pair, or coax cable, delivering Ethernet to 2,000 feet in distance, delivering power up to 50 watts over those existing infrastructures. Imagine that. So this is where it really plays in and really disrupts the market and causes people to think about that whole modern LAN theory. There's Frost and Sullivan, as I said. They've already done one white paper that talks about changing the way you think about networks, and the new one's coming out in June as well that'll talk about the modern LAN and how they see it. So we'll show you now the different products that are available, and then I've got some examples of how it works. After this next slide, I'll pause for some questions, so get your questions ready. So we've got 3 different flavors. The top one you see here, it runs on a single pair of 26-gauge twisted pair or better. Think of Cat 3 type of cable, telephone wire. It'll give you 10 megs of full duplex Ethernet, which is more than enough for voice. Voice needs about 100K, and it'll give you up to 20 watts of power. It'll go 1,200 feet in a bundle, 25, 50, 500, 900 pair bundle. We've got customers using all of those. If you've got a home run Cat 3, you're going to get closer to 1,800 feet. And we make a 24, 48-port managed version as well as an 8-port unmanaged version of that product. The one in the middle is called the Flex. The Flex will run on any 2 or 4 pair. Think of a Cat 5 or 6 cable. It'll go up to 2,000 feet as well, deliver 100 megs of full duplex Ethernet and up to 50 watts of power. The Flex also comes in a 24-port, and we've just released an 8-port unmanaged version of that product. Then next is our Clear product line, which runs on coax cable. Again, giving you 2,000 feet distance, 100 megs of Ethernet, and up to 30 watts of PoE power using that existing infrastructure. What's common amongst all the switches is at the endpoint there's a little converter, basically taking on the top one an RJ11 on one end and an RJ45 on the other. There's no power required at the endpoint. It's actually getting its power from the switch, and it's also passing the PoE power through to the endpoint. So the phone or device is going to get PoE power from the switch all the way back in the main closet, 1,200 or 2,000 feet away. So eliminating those costs, eliminating those stops along the way, as I said before. This is the modern LAN. So here's the different switches. As you can see, they share a common footprint. The downlink ports are what you connect to the endpoints. So you've got the polar at the bottom that has Amphenol type connectors that using the existing Amphenols. You've got the coax with the Clear, and you've got the multi-pair UTP with the Flex. The other parts that they share is the management and console ports, and I'll explain those later on and their value to you, especially that management port. Dedicated dual gigabit uplink ports that can be bonded. It supports rapid spanning tree, spamming tree, link aggregation, all of that as well. And then you've got two fiber ports as well, supporting single mode or multi-mode fiber. You can see here you've got hot swappable power supplies and a technology that we call PowerWise. PowerWise is a very unique feature. And what we looked at was we wanted to add some redundancy to our switches, but we didn't want to increase the size. So these are one-use chassis, could be rack mounted, and on the back there's AC and DC. So if you've got a DC power source in a hospital, for example, battery bank, you could plug that in. Or if you don't, you can actually connect up to 4 of our switches together on the back on the DC up, in and out. We sell a set of cables for that, and you can do a power sharing, load balancing ring with those products. We also have an 8-port unmanaged version of the Polar, the Flex, and a 10-port version of our Clear called the EC10. So that kind of rounds out our managed and unmanaged switches. I'm going to take a sip of water, and I'm going to just kind of pause it. If anybody has any questions, I think we got everybody muted. Maybe you want to see, Chuck, if you want to unmute them and see if anyone has any questions.
Right. Everybody is now unmuted. So if you got any questions, let us know.
Got Doug back here, who's our IT guy. Oh.
All right, I'm going to take
that. We're good to go, Richard.
Good stuff. Mute them back again. Somebody's talking, it sounds like, and I'll continue going. We'll do it again in a couple
minutes. Going.
Super. Thanks, Chuck.
You bet.
All right, so here's an example of the types of endpoints that we can enable with the different products. Again, they're all device and vendor agnostic, so it's a cross-platform. If you've got a single pair of wire running to a speaker, you can use the Polar. If you've got a couple wires, you might want to use the Flex instead. It gives you a little more bandwidth. It depends on what you want to do. So I'll talk about how the solutions are implemented, and then we'll talk about some use cases as well. So we'll start with cameras. There we go. So you've got analog cameras connected to a DVR. You've got a customer that's got these in place and wants to move to a shiny new IP solution. So basically, we'll come in. You guys will rack stack and configure the switch, plug it into the network, unplug the existing coax from the DVR, plug it in the front of the switch, plug in our little converter, taking the coax and converting it to RJ45, and then you plug in your new camera. You just migrate it to IP. So, simple as that. And once you know one of our products, you know all the rest. Basically doing the same thing. The adapter comes in a single port version, 1-to-1, and also a 1-to-4. A lot of customers have analog cameras out there and want to deploy multiple cameras so they get better coverage, or they may want to deploy a camera and something else that requires PoE. So we got PoE and Ethernet across all 4 of those ports up to 2,000 feet away. There's that power sharing that I told you about before, so you can actually connect those switches together on the back and create that power sharing load balancing ring as well. So that's the Clear, the coax product. And how it looks once it's been implemented is just like that. You keep it separate if you want. Again, a lot of customers are very, very leery about these cyber attacks. So any new systems are put in place, they like them isolated. So you want to isolate it like this, you can. If you want to have some integration, no problem. You can then connect in the network through a firewall if you want, uplink ports, whatever your customer wants, whatever makes the most sense for you. And that way, you've got no impact on the production network as well. There's 3 ways to use this coax infrastructure. You've got the managed switch, 24-port, and you can connect multiple switches together. You've got a 10-port unmanaged, again, with dual gigabit uplinks that you can connect together. And then you've got a single extender mode version. The adapters actually can be used in single mode extender mode to run it over a single coax cable, let's say, that you've got, if you only got a single run that you want to do. So what do you get? Well, you know, all of the things that we talked about before that were a barrier end up being gone. You know, the cables, there's no IDF closet requirements at all. It's fast. It's less expensive. It's less risky. It's less disruptive. And if you want to do a proof of concept, you can do it very easily. Put them in, put some new devices on, run them for a couple weeks or a month, and then put it back the way that it was before if you want. So there's no downtime. There's the 10-port unmanaged version. Again, plug and play, just like the 24-port, but it doesn't have any software. So it just gets plugged in, piece of cake, and it's going to give you that 100 megs and up to 30 watts of power per port. There's a rack mount kit that's for those as well, and we sell these links in 2 packs as well. And there's a 4-port version. So next in the lineup is our flex switch. So this is an interesting switch. As I said, it's a PoE switch like any other, except that it provides maximum PoE up to 50 watts per port, all ports simultaneously. So unlike other switches in the market where only 1 or 2 or 4 or 8 of the ports are full PoE++ enabled, all of our ports are. And if you have a run that's under the 100 meters or 300-foot distance, then you don't even need an adapter. So as you can see in our example here, we've got existing UTP camera that's within the 100 meters. You just plug it right in, or a speaker. If you need to go further, you plug in the FlexLink adapter up to 2,000 feet away, and then you can run on a Cat 5 or 6 cable 2,000 feet in distance, giving you up to 50 watts of power as well. And there is a 4-port version of the Flex adapter as well. It can be locally powered, but that's optional. It doesn't require local power. These are powered by the switch, and they're delivering full bandwidth and power all the way to the endpoints as well. This switch is being used in retrofit, brownfield, as well as greenfield examples. I used an example this morning. I'll use it again. We had a customer up here in Canada that owns a whole bunch of outdoor malls, and they wanted to deliver wireless access points in the malls for their guests to be able to browse and you know, send advertisements and specials. So they were going to go, and every 300 feet, they were going to build a data closet. They were going to have to build 7 data closets in this outdoor mall. It was going to take about 150 square feet of rentable space per closet. So do the math quickly in the back of a napkin. You're going to get about 900 square feet, almost 1,000 square feet of rentable space that they were going to lose because they had to build these closets that weren't bringing anybody any return. And that was going to take a lot of time and a lot of disruption to their guests. Well, with our Flex switch, they put it in the middle of the mall, and they did the whole mall from one closet. 2,000 feet, all the access points were deployed in one closet. All the backup power and everything was in that same single closet, and they ended up retaining a whole bunch of rentable space. They're very, very happy about that. Their plans are to roll this out across their entire portfolio of malls over the next year. There's the Flex in action, same as the Clear that you saw before. You plug them in. If you want to keep it separate, there you go. If you want to add some integration, you could plug it into the network. You could put a firewall in between. It does VLANs. All of our managed switches support VLANs as well, and you get that same functionality from the product. Flex comes in a 24-port managed, an 8-port. It says coming soon, but it's actually been released last week, or the week before. Sorry, April 1st we released that. And it also comes in an extender version as well. It comes with a base and a link at the far end and the power supply. These can also be plugged into any standard PoE switch as well. If you've got a couple of runs, maybe buying a 10 or an 8-port or a 24-port may be a little bit too much. If for only a couple of runs, you could just use a pair of these links and do a 2,000 feet over a Cat 5 or 6 cable. Plug it into your regular PoE switch if you need to. Here's how the extenders work. So you've got your endpoint. Instead of having to go and worry about how to get there, if it's 2,000 feet away, you got your base, plug it into the switch. You've got your link, plug it into the endpoint. There's additional power optional. You don't need that. Like I said, if you need more power at the endpoint, then we're giving you. It's 50 watts at about 1,200 feet. At 2,000 feet, you're going to get about 28 or 29 watts. So if you need more, you can apply local power to it as well. Same thing with the Flex 4. That's how that works. And, you know, just like we showed before, you've got a huge coverage area now using this product, and you'll be able to you know, blanket an entire area with access points or whatever other device you may want to deploy over that extended distance. The kits come in a, as I said, they come in a 4-port or a 1-port extender kit version. There's the part numbers and all the rest of that stuff. And finally, I'll talk about that afterwards. A little bit of feature functionality, and then we'll pause and see if anyone has any questions. So a couple things that to note, you know, you can actually reset a port remotely. So if you're managing a solution, you can actually go in, log in, and you can power cycle. Let's say you got a camera that's hung and needs to be rebooted, or a phone, you could do that remotely. You don't have to go out to the physically unplug and plug the device back in. Do it right within our web GUI. Troubleshooting. It's got troubleshooting capabilities built into the interface. It'll tell you if you've got a bad cable. It'll tell you if you've got some communication problem. It'll tell you if the device is not working, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute in the different products. You've got port statistics, uptime. You've got SNMP traps that will be able to send out just like you'd expect from any switch, but with additional functionality. For security, we have port locking. So once your devices have been deployed, you can choose to lock the MAC to a particular port, and that way if somebody tries to plug something into the back of the device or unplug the device and plug something else in, they can't, because only that MAC will work on that particular port, which is, again, a great feature for customers looking for a secure way of deploying. The power I showed you before, you can connect up to 4 of the switches together on the back to provide a power sharing load balancing ring. And using the hot swappable power supplies, customers have 100% uptime when it comes to power. Here's the landing page, gives you all kinds of different statistics depending on what type of product you're using. These are the Clear and the Flex product provide additional PoE and power and bandwidth type of statistics in the different web GUIs that they've got in place, as you can see right here. VLANs, piece of cake, 3 steps, click add, type in the number, add it, edit, choose the ports you want to make into VLANs, and you're done. 512 VLANs per port, 4,096 VLANs per switch. Here's all the different protocols that we support. It has a command line as well as a web interface. You can go in and do command line stuff if you want. It supports all these protocols, TACX, Radius, SSH, HTTPS. A lot of our customers are looking for that. You can turn on or off any or all of those services. The only service you can't turn off is the built-in log server for troubleshooting. And you can even set up a remote log server if you like. We already saw this part, but basically, here's what I was talking about before. So let's say you've got a customer that's asked you to manage the infrastructure once it's put in, but they are very leery about giving access to the internal data network, given all these cyber attacks that we're hearing about. Well, the managed switches come with a built-in out-of-band management port, and that out-of-band management port is actually physically isolated from the in-band ports. So you could set up a out-of-band management ring and connect to that remotely. You'd have access to the switch themselves, so you could troubleshoot the switches and see if there's a problem with the switches. You could see if there was a problem with the adapters, and you could see if there's a problem with the cable. You could also see if there's a problem with the device that's plugged into it, but you can't see the device. You can't see the images on the cameras. You can't hear the conversations on the phone, but you can troubleshoot the application. So think about that in a hosted type of environment where you're doing a cloud-based solution, let's say a cloud-based voice solution, and it's a managed service. Well, you can basically do all the management for the customer remotely, providing an end-to-end connection, and they don't have to worry about it on their LAN at all. They get a managed solution, cloud-based solution that's fully managed from your Forerunner team remotely. Pretty powerful stuff, and this is what customers really, really like. You know, build recurring revenues, it says, by offering a network monitoring service as part of your management offering. So you think about a cloud solution today. A lot of times when you're talking to a customer about that, you're telling them, okay, well, you got to get your network ready for voice. You've got to go and put in PoE switches and QoS and all this other stuff, and maybe you give them a checklist, and then they're going to get the phones in a box and they're going to plug it into their network and they're going to use them. Well, who's managing that? If it's on the customer's data network, who's truly managing that solution? It's hard to tell, isn't it? Well, if you use this type of methodology, then you are truly providing a managed cloud service. You've got the application in the cloud, you've got the connectivity to the building, you've got the switches that connect to the existing infrastructure in the voice, for example, using the existing Cat3 cabling. You've got an IP phone that sits on the end, and then you have remote monitoring capabilities to make sure that any problems occur, you can address them remotely, and you can ensure that any problems that occur have nothing to do with the LAN, and the customer doesn't have to worry about it either. We'll use that example now with the Polar product, and then I'm going to have a sip of water again, and we'll see if anybody has any questions. So we've got a customer here looking to migrate from an old Nortel. That was me, as a matter of fact. I had an old Nortel, and I was looking to migrate, and wasn't sure what I was going to do, but came across the NVT Phybridge solution, and this is exactly what we did. Rack stacked and configured the switches, connected them into the network, pulled the Amphenol cable off the front of the digital or analog line cards, plugged them in the front of the switch, connected that existing wiring. At the phone end, we unplugged the RJ11 from the existing digital phone, plugged in the adapter, and then connected in the brand new IP phone. And then plug it into the network. Plug it into a cloud solution, into a router, into a PBX, or directly into the network. It doesn't matter, whatever the solution calls for. By the way, the adapter is an exploded view here. If I had the actual size, you wouldn't even be able to see it. It's about the size of a USB key. It can be plugged into a short RJ11 and just be left hanging by the wall jack, or it can be plugged into a short RJ45 and tucked in behind the phone as well. So it's very, very seamless and very, very simple to see. If you want to see if anyone has any questions, Chuck, I'm going to have another sip of water.
Okay, unmuting everybody. So if you've got any questions, your lines are unmuted. I think you're nailing it, Richard.
Boy, I must be doing a good job. Okay, no question.
I have a quick question, if you can hear me.
Absolutely, Ray.
Okay. We've had a lot of susceptibility over the years in certain areas where we get hit by lightning. So we put line arresters in and things like that, and we've been tending to go fiber just to get rid of the induced voltage in the ground taking us out. And it's come in on our phone system as well. What is the vulnerability for lines going, underground lines, they're just basically in conduit through the grounds? What's the vulnerability to lightning for this system?
You would handle this exactly you would in a legacy environment. So having proper lightning protection in place, it doesn't affect the functionality. So, and the trick is to have it at both ends, right? Right. And we have lots of customers that are like that. I know in the Midwest they're very susceptible to lightning strikes. So we've got a couple of colleges, universities that have been using our products for years and years, but they had to make sure they had the proper lightning protection in place to protect those, especially the head-end equipment. Sometimes you don't have something on the end point. You may lose a phone or maybe one of the adapters if it gets struck, but making sure you've got proper protection at the head end especially is definitely recommended, and it won't affect the functionality of our products.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anyone else?
Got all the questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, good stuff.
Richard.
Thank you. All right, so here we go. Here's the Polar in action. We've got a 24-port, a 48-port managed, as well as an 8-port plug-and-play version, as I showed you before. They've got the dual gigabit uplinks on the 8-port as well as the 24 and 48 ports as well to fit into any environment that you want. So again, use my example. If you've got a customer, we've got lots of customers that have many, many locations with only a handful of phones, retail chains, for example, they've standardized on these products, either an 8-port or a 24-port, where they're able to go into the store and do a very quick migration. A lot of them are looking to do cloud-based solutions, in fact. So that's a really nice way to go and deploy a cloud-based solution using that existing infrastructure and really cutting down on the cost and the disruption. Here's the Polar, some of the features and functionality, as you can see. As I said, we've got industry-leading power, all the things that you'd expect. There's that web interface, and I wanted to kind of show everyone that. So as you can see, it's a little hard to see on the screen here, but I had a question earlier on about troubleshooting. So what's really neat about this is it provides you visual indicators. If you look at the screen, you can see there's a bunch of gray ports. Those are ports that have nothing plugged in. there are a bunch of green ports. That's a port that has an adapter as well as a device plugged in, a phone, for example. And it picks up the MAC address of that phone as well. If you hover over the port, it'll actually give you the MAC address. So it knows that the device, the adapter, the switch are all working end to end. So you've got good connectivity there. If you see a blue port, it means that the adapter is connected and speaking with the switch, but there's no endpoint. Either it's been unplugged or it's having a problem. There's something wrong with that endpoint. What also happens is the switch constantly is in communication with the adapter. Every millisecond, it's sending out a keep alive. And if it doesn't get a response, it starts to fire what we call a link down event. And it'll slowly turn the color of the numbers from a solid black to a red to tell you that you've got a physical problem with the line connecting the switch to the adapter. And we use this, an example, a customer in a museum who deployed their phones with our product. About 3 or 4 months in, they were having some issues, and we were able to go into the switch and have a look and see that the link down counters were running, and the port had actually turned red. What had happened is someone had put a staple through the Cat3 cable when they were installing some carpet, and that had caused some connectivity issues, and we were able to resolve that immediately. We were able to tell them what port it was, they were able to trace the cable, and they were able to splice out and repair that damaged section, and their phones were back up and running. So kind of a great solution, and all of our switches have that advanced troubleshooting capability built in the managed switches. So here's what it looks like after you've gone and deployed your voice solution using the Polar product. From an end user perspective, you've got your computer, you've got your new IP phone on your desk, and everything's working great. Everything's located in your MDF closet where your old PBX and gear was, where you can centralize the power and the backup and all that good stuff, and you don't have to worry about having it riding on that data network, which is constantly in flux. As more and more devices get added to the network, there's more and more demand on bandwidth and that type of thing as well. And as I said, I want to point out, proof of concept is available for any customer that's looking to try this out, put it in, and take a run with a new IP solution. Here's an interesting slide. You know, what do all of these sites have in common? The same infrastructure for their legacy voice. We've got customers, you saw in one of my slides, the British government embassies, the Canadian government embassies, the U.S. government embassies are using these products. And what they liked about it the most is that regardless of where you are in the world, the infrastructure connecting you to your existing voice solution is the same because it was designed for that. So we can go anywhere. We can go to China, we can go to Australia, we can go to Texas, we can go to Canada, where I'm from, and we know that wherever we go, the customer has an existing phone system, we can put an IP system in place using that existing wiring infrastructure because it's the same. We're currently doing 2 very large cruise ships that have about 4,000 phones on each ship. And again, the common thing, the wiring's all the same. So what you end up getting is a predictable, repeatable, and scalable solution across all locations. Whether you're a customer that has multiple locations or you're a Frontier employee that's looking to bring a solution to your customer, you can go to them with confidence knowing that regardless of where they're located, if they got a legacy solution in place, you can have an IP solution in place tomorrow without any migration hiccups. You can give them a guaranteed pricing for the solution because we know exactly what they need based on the number of endpoints and the number of cables they got, number of buildings, and there you're at it. So you've got that solution. I think that's probably the most powerful thing is that predictable, repeatable, and scalable. And those of you that are familiar with digital Centrex, it's been around for 20, 30 years. A lot of government customers have that in place. A lot of customers overall have that, where they don't want to manage the voice. They want to have the voice provider manage the voice. So think about that. If you use the same infrastructure, you're able to provide the same experience as a digital Centrex model. But if you're not, and you're layering the voice on the data network, you're not having the same experience. The data network is now the common denominator, and if there's issues with the data network, if there's bandwidth increases, or even things change in 6 months or a year, it may affect the voice. And if it affects the voice, the customer is going to be wanting someone to take care of it and fix it. And if you're the voice provider, you're the one that's going to have to fix it for them. So why go down that path? If you know that you can deliver a 100% 5 nines reliable solution, because that's what they have today with their legacy solution, why wouldn't you do that? All right, well, we're just about near the end of our presentation. We'll open it up to some questions in a moment. So keep in mind, we've got proof of concepts available, as I said before. We've got customer references on our website. If you want to talk to some customers, we can arrange that as well. Design validation, we can help. We've got our engineering team that can help with pre-sales and post-sales as well. And we even have calculators to help you determine cost and savings. I want to share with you, because I do have a couple minutes before we log off, some customer success stories and considerations. So we're very strong in the hospitality vertical. I told you about the cruise ships, but we also have hundreds and hundreds, in fact, thousands of hotels that are using our product, mainly for the admin phones, but they're using it in the different flags. So we've worked with all the different flags. The Four Seasons is just one of them, but we've got them in the Hiltons and Hyatts and in you know, the Starwood lines, in the IHGs. It go across the board. Hospitality is a great vertical for this. Education. This is New Mexico State University. 4,000 phones deployed in under a year. They were going to take 3 to 4 years to do that with their traditional rip and replace. So they're able to migrate those phones very, very quickly and non-disruptively. They saved themselves over $1 million in infrastructure, another $1 million in labor, and they were able to allocate more budget to the applications that I talked about before. Penitentiary, so prisons and jails are really great areas to consider for this type of solution. Government. The Mexican government, you saw some other government slides before. Again, very, very strong vertical. There's one that, you know, we know about here, the most powerful building in America. Actually, it's true. In the White House, we have our phones, the Cisco phones, are using this solution to deliver Ethernet and PoE for those phones in that building. Without it, they weren't able to do it. So as we said before, the only thing that interferes with my learning is my education. So with that, I'm going to end my part and ask if there are any further questions. If you want to go and open that up one last time, Chuck, and see if anyone has any questions.
That's no problem,
Yeah, all phones are unmuted now, so if you've got any questions, please ask.
I sent you my email address.
Yeah, I got it.
Phone number's the same, so.
Okay.
Whatever I can do, if you need anything, got a question.
All right. Yeah.
I think
Sure.
I think we're good on the questions then. So with that, we'll go ahead and end.
You're welcome.
We'll end the session, and I thank you for your time.